You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Bill Connolly every year puts out his SP Plus rankings, and then he has his initial rankings, then he updates them post-portal, and then periodically, like post-spring, and then before the season starts and throughout the year. SP Plus is, this is it's a metric that measures and ranks teams based on three things: returning production, recent recruiting, and recent history. I'm oversimplifying it, but it's those three things that he puts together as SP Plus rankings. I want to remind you, this is not a be-all, end-all. It's just something to consider. It is a metric that a guy has put together that seems fairly accurate, that people trust and respect. So we look at it. But sometimes I think things like SP Plus have become harder to navigate because of the transfer portal. Again, the metrics that he uses are recent success, recent recruiting, and returning production. Well, the transfer portal has flipped returning production on its head, and the transfer portal has flipped recruiting success on its head. When in a given year, half of your roster turns over, that means after 2 seasons, half of your recruiting class is gone. So I think it's much more difficult to gauge this. Let me give you a for instance. So in these initial SP Plus rankings, which, by the way, now feature 136 teams, Delaware and Missouri State are now FBS. The number one team in the initial SP Plus rankings is Ohio State, the defending national champion. Number 2 is Alabama. Excuse me while I belly laugh looking at that. Alabama, which just lost 4 games, 3 in the regular season and their bowl game, which is losing its starting quarterback, a ton of production on both sides of the ball, and had 50% of its roster leave again. That's one of those where I say, in no way is that a competent measurement, because recent success would include Nick Saban's teams at Alabama, which obviously it's just a dramatically different era, giant asterisk. Returning production, again, you saw a ton of your production go out the door. And then the other part of it, with your recent recruiting success, that was Nick Saban recruiting those classes. And in 2 years, a year ago, half your roster turned over. So, sure, that might still matter if Nick were there, but the dramatic overhaul that's taken place in Tuscaloosa in the last 13 months, it's not even remotely close to the same program. As a matter of fact, Kalen DeBoer did an interview, and Matt Zenitz has this quote out there, which is getting a ton of play all over the internet. But Kalen DeBoer has a quote about, I'm sorry, it wasn't Matt Zenitz, it was Pete Nakos, excuse me, at On 3. Kalen DeBoer believes revenue share can put Alabama back on a balanced playing field. That's a quote from Kalen DeBose. Quote, having a more balanced playing field helps our situation. It allows us to get where it was at one point just a few years back, where recruiting is real recruiting, not just someone who's going to put in the highest bid. Forgive me while I belly laugh at the head coach at Alabama bitching about an unfair playing field and how things were a few years back. And people who think that revenue share is going to change recruiting, maybe I'm skeptical. I just cannot fathom a world where we think just because the revenue share piece is passed and Deloitte is all of a sudden going to monitor NIL deals, that we think there aren't going to be under-the-table deals done. That we think that somehow the rich people who want to funnel money into their programs aren't going to do that. Anyway, as far as the rest of the top 10, the SP+, Ohio State, Bama, Penn State, Georgia, Notre Dame 5, followed by Oregon, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, LSU. Man, there's a lot of SEC flavor in there. Clemson's at 11, followed by A&M at 12, The next SEC teams, Missouri at 15, South Carolina 16, Florida at 17, Oklahoma at 20. It's a whole lot of teams LSU plays, which is in part why when BetOnline today released their updated win totals for 2025, LSU dropped. The original number at BetOnline was 9.5, over under 9.5. The new number at BetOnline for LSU is 8.5. And I got news for you, Coach. If LSU goes under that number, if LSU wins 8 games, I would submit actually, if LSU wins 9 games, goes 9-3 and misses the postseason, Brian Kelly will not make the playoffs during his time at LSU because he will not have a better roster at LSU than he'll have this year. With Nussmeier coming back as a fifth-year senior, with all the money they just pumped in via the transfer portal to build this roster into a contender, if you can't get this roster, I don't care against what schedule, if you can't get this roster to 10 wins and get in the playoffs, I don't see a path for it to happen because what will happen after 25 is you lose Nussmeier, you lose all the transfers you just brought in, and you will not have any type of continuity, and you're going to lose a ton of your production. You're going to see like what happened to Michigan this year, or what happened to Florida State, or like what I think's about to happen to Ole Miss. So, I get it, man. Their job is to put odds out there that's going to attract action on both sides of the number. And clearly there were a lot of people going under 9.5, which is why they adjusted it to 8.5. I might fancy a guess that if you can get 8.5 somewhere right now, take the over, you should probably take it. Because I don't want to live in a world where this LSU team goes 8-4. Because if that happens, it's going to be a tough fall for Brian Kelly and some tough decisions for the decision makers to make about his future. Because if you can't get this team into the college football playoff, this team loses 4 games, it's hard to imagine a scenario where it can go. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.